Any questions asked in the Q&A portion will be documented and shared in the Japanese beetle update. If you do have a question throughout the session, you can save it for the Q&A portion, or you can also raise your hand using the function at the top of your screen. Our speakers tonight will be Jason Crandall from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. We also have Tracy Hueppelsheuser from the BC Ministry of Agriculture. And then joining us tonight in support for the Q&A session will be Sophie Desereau from the City of Vancouver, Tracy Tobin from the City of Burnaby, and Scott Walmsley from the City of Port Coquitlam. We would really like to recognize and appreciate all the professionals who are working in collaboration within the landscape and horticulture areas, especially those who are working within the designated zones, who stay diligent and are really committed to this program. It is going to take all of us, from landscape professionals, government, industry members, and retail centers and municipalities, in order to reduce the spread of Japanese beetle and to reach a state of eradication. So I'm going to go ahead right away and turn it over to Jason. If you want to take control here.
Yeah, no problem. I'll share my screen right away. Okay, my name is Jason Crandall, and I'm an inspection advisor for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. And one of the files that I work on is Japanese beetle, and I've been with that program in some capacity since the very beginning. So I'm here to tell you what that's all about. I'll go over briefly where Japanese beetle is found and some of the biology of the pest, and then I'll talk about the surveillance program that we do and some of the results that we've had from that surveillance. And then we'll get into more of the regulatory stuff, and I'll talk about movement restrictions and what that means for you guys. So first of all, what is Japanese beetle? Well, very literally, it's a scarab beetle. And like all scarab beetles, you have 4 distinct life stages. You've got egg, larva, pupa, adult. The adults lay eggs around the end of the summer. They can lay up to 60 eggs in the first 2 to 5 centimeters of soil. In about 2 weeks, those eggs hatch. And the first few instars of larvae start feeding on the roots, and primarily that means turf grass. As the winter starts to come on and fall gets colder, the larvae dig down to about 30 centimeters. And that's where they overwinter. They go into diapause and they kind of hibernate through the colder months there. When it starts to warm up again in April and May, the larvae dig their way back up into the root zone. They resume feeding. They finish their life as a larva. They pupate, and then they emerge in about June, mid-June to late June, early July. They start emerging. They mate, they feed, and the cycle starts all over again. In a more bureaucratic way, Japanese beetle is a regulated and quarantined pest. And what that means is, at a federal level, we're very concerned with the presence of Japanese beetle. It's an invasive species, and it has a lot of potential for economic damage. And so what you're seeing here is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and the USDA have created a regulatory status for every province and state in North America. And that just indicates the pest presence in those territories. What that means is that that regulatory status sort of dictates the movement of material between provinces, between states, and between countries. Right now, and the color blocking on the key there is a little off, but orange is category 1, which is pest-free. And right now, British Columbia has a pest-free status, and the whole aim of this eradication program is to protect industry and maintain that status as pest free. So I'll talk about the implications of that, I think, in a coming slide. So why is it regulated? Well, we went through the life cycle and we know that the larval form, the grub, feeds on turf grass. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the chafer beetle, and the damage that you see from Japanese beetle as a grub is very similar to that. You'll see brown patches, patches of dead grass, things like that. The crows love them, the raccoons love them. We've all seen it before. But unlike chafer beetle, the adults also feed, and they feed very voraciously. They skeletonize leaves, they eat flowers, they eat fruit. They cause a lot of damage that can, be cosmetic, but also cause crop loss as well. Now, when I say they feed voraciously, I mean it. There's over 300 species of plants that they are known to feed on, and probably more than that, actually. And as we've gone through our surveillance program and the literature as we go through it, it tells us that they do have some feeding preferences. And here in Vancouver, what we've seen, especially in David Lamb Park, where we had kind of an epicenter of a high population, we noticed that there was a lot of feeding on Persicaria. So that's kind of our number one favorite here in Vancouver. But on that list also is many things you see very commonly in the Lower Mainland: roses, Japanese maple, grapevines, elderberry, prunus, raspberries, you name it. So there's a high potential for economic damage there. And so that includes the agriculture and the horticulture sectors, but the increased cost due to potential damage and control also applies to municipalities and the general public. And if we lose that pest-free status, what that means is we'll have to set up a requirement for certification programs that would exclude the beetle and allow product to be exported to the United States or move even within the country to provinces that don't already have Japanese beetles. So there's a potential increased cost there as well, in addition to control and damage. And it can get pretty bad. These pictures are not from here, but the population can get quite out of control very quickly if it's not looked at. So you can see the picture on the left. You set up a trap in the early morning, and then by later that afternoon, the bag is full of hundreds of beetles, and that's really where you're going to start to see lots of damage happening. So we really try to stay away from this potential future. So surveillance. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency, our main function within this program is to conduct surveillance for Japanese beetle. And we try to have all of our traps set up by June 15th so that we capture that flight window for the adult beetle, because that's what the trap picks up. So to have all of our traps set up by June 15th, trap placement begins now. We've already begun. We're probably about 2 weeks into it already. We have a ton of traps to set up. And then once they're all set up by June 15th, from then on until mid-October, we service those traps every 3 weeks, and we collect our data that way. We do have some high-risk sites that we want more granular data from, so we check those a little bit more frequently, and that's typically about once a week. So I talked about traps, and we have a real spectrum of traps here along the bottom. They all look a little differently, and they're not all created equal, but we do employ all of these traps, and they do all work, and they all function largely the same way. We use a dual lure, which is displayed at the top there. It's a combination floral cue and a sex pheromone. And the traps have a yellow vein. There's 4 veins at the top that feed into a funnel that goes down into a collection cup. And essentially the beetle flies towards the lure and either crashes into the veins or it kind of hovers around the lure and then closes up its wings. And either way, it drops down through the funnel and into the cup where it's collected and it's essentially trapped. They're not super accurate flyers, so they can't fly straight up and out of the funnel. They're very clumsy. There's no kill agent in there. There's no fluid or liquid, so they're just kind of stuck in the collection cup until we come and get them. We do have different types of placements. So in addition to different trap types, we have different ways of setting them up. A ground trap is typically a trap that's set at eye level or lower, which is your normal setup. Most of the traps look like that, but we do set up traps in canopies. And that was really born of trying to keep traps out of reach in places where we saw a lot of theft and vandalism. And so we started putting traps high up into the tree with an extendable pole arm. And what we noticed, and through research we verified this, the canopy traps are actually more effective because the beetle feeds from the top of the host downwards. So we employ canopy traps kind of in sentinel areas where we want very early detection because they're more attractive, they're more effective. Or we use them in high risk sites, or we use them in delimitations when we have a new detection. And it's proven to be very effective. It says rooftop traps there too. We don't do that as much, but when we had a high population in Yaletown, we were petitioning people to let us put traps on their roof, just in case there was, beetles moving upwards onto rooftop patios, or a lot of those buildings have rooftop gardens and large trees and things like that. So they work as well. Here's what that data looks like kind of all together, starting from the beginning in 2017 and going, this graph goes to 2022, and I will share the 2023 data with you as well. But so back in 2017, we picked up a single beetle around Falls Creek, and then we did a delimitation, meaning we set up more traps around that find. And as we looked harder, we found more beetles. So in 2017, we had 958 beetles. And sorry, the blue bar is the number of traps that we set out. The green number is the number of traps that we found beetles in, and then the red line is the total number of beetles that we caught, just in case you can't read the small print at the bottom there. But so the peak of the population was in 2018. That was when it was at its worst. There was about 8,000 beetles and in 98 traps. And that's also when we started really treating. And treatment it's kind of a lag of about a year or two to really start showing its effect. So that's what you see here on this graph. The population declined all the way to 2021, where we saw only 79 beetles. Then we detected a new population in Port Coquitlam, which is why you see it jump up in 2022 to 201. And it does jump up again slightly in 2023. But again, that's primarily Port Coquitlam, and I'll draw some comparisons for you. So before I show you the 2023 results, this is what the survey program looked like for last year. We set out 5,191 traps, and we set them at different densities. Every year we kind of tailor the survey program to have really bespoke densities for each area, each municipality. And what that means is we have a number of traps per square mile. So for example, in Langley and Surrey and White Rock there, it's 1 trap per square mile, but that goes as high as 49 traps per square mile in places like Port Coquitlam. where we want high confidence in our data, where we really want to find that beetle early, delimit the population, verify the effectiveness of our treatments and things like that. The densities are much higher in areas of known population or areas of concern, like, for example, pit meadows, where we hope it doesn't go to pit meadows, but we have a high density there so that we can catch it as early as possible, because getting those treatments started is crucial. So in 2023, here we have the results summarized in a table. And we caught a total of 644 beetles, which, if you remember a couple of slides ago, that's an increase from, I think it was 201 or something like that in 2022. So it did go up again, but like I said, that is the result of treatments kind of being a year behind the survey and needing time to take effect. So we saw a very similar thing in Vancouver, where the population jumped up before it went back down. And we think that's happening here in Port Coquitlam as well, but on a much smaller scale. We're still, even with this total number of 644, doing pretty well, and it's still a dramatic reduction from previous numbers in 2018 and 2019. The success story here is Vancouver. Most of the beetles in previous years were in Vancouver. They were the old Port Coquitlam in terms of beetle populations, and last year we only caught 3 beetles in Vancouver. So we know the treatments work, and here's a comparison for you to really show that. In 2018, like I said, we caught about 8,000 beetles, and this is the blue shaded area is the original regulated area. So that area has seen the longest amount of time with beetles present and the longest amount of time with treatments being applied to those beetle populations. And you compare apples to apples, you look at that same area last year in 2023, we caught 0 beetles. The 3 beetles that we did catch in Vancouver were further south into the city, but again, a real success story, and it really tells us that we need to keep our foot on the gas, and that eradication is possible if we want it. Yeah, just like I said, 100% reduction effectively in that original regulated area from 2018. So that takes us to movement controls, and we'll talk about some of the other things that we implement to help control the beetles. We talked about the survey, and Tracy's going to talk more about the treatments, but movement controls is the third and pretty key piece to this eradication response. Human-assisted movement is one of the main ways that the beetle travels. So movement controls are an important focus for us as well. So it used to be that we implemented movement controls with a ministerial order, and that really kind of allowed us to go above and beyond what our normal regulatory powers are and implement these regulated areas and things. But things are getting better, and we believed that we could still regulate effectively simply within the boundaries of our Plant Protection Act. So on May 5th of last year, the ministerial order was revoked, and we amended and revised our directive. And the regulated areas are still in place, but we're only regulating the material that we feel is the highest risk pathway for beetle dispersal, and that is plants with soil or soil-related matter attached. And we're amending that definition again to include growing media, which, if you ask me, is basically soil-related matter, but we want to be all-encompassing, and that really really captures it better. So we have these regulated areas in British Columbia, and I'll tell you more about what exactly that means for you in a couple of slides. But here's just showing the boundaries. We've got Burnaby, and then Port Coquitlam being most of the municipality as a regulated area, and then Vancouver right here. Again, pretty sizable area of the city. And so if you are moving plants with soil attached or soil related matter within the boundaries of those regulated area, that's fine. There's no restrictions. You can move as much as you want to. If you're moving things into a regulated area, if you're coming from outside, you're going inside, that's also fine. There's no restrictions on that too, and that's permitted. But if you are within the regulated area and your material originates within the regulated area and you're moving out, that is where restrictions apply, and movement certificate may be required. And you kind of think of it as a lab, like you always want to go from clean to dirty and never the other way around. So you can move within, you can move into, but you can't move back out. And if you're transiting through, that's okay too. If you're driving into the regulated area and you're coming right back out the other side, there's no restrictions applied to that. So again, regulated articles include plants with soil or soil-related matter or growing media attached, and that's applicable year-round. And if, as per the map on the previous slide, you want to move material originating from within those boundaries out of the regulated areas, a movement certificate is required. And what is a movement certificate? Well, a movement certificate is basically like it's almost like an export document. Like if you were to export material across the border, you would need paperwork that allows you to export that material. It's very similar to that, except it's for domestic movement, really. And it just basically says, this is a known movement. We're aware of it as a regulatory agency. Steps have been put into place to mitigate the risk that's involved with moving this material. It's never no risk, but there's always some risk. So the movement certificates come with a set of conditions that mitigate that risk, and it allows you to move the material if necessary, either typically for disposal, whether it's to the dump or a compost site or something like that, or people move, and that's allowable too. And we have different sets of conditions for different situations. So I'm talking a lot about soil related matter and things like that, and we have definitions for those, and it's exactly what you would think it would be. It's compost, earthworm castings, that kind of stuff, either on their own or in any combination. Whatever you would consider soil related matter is probably captured in the definition. Substantially free from soil, also very important. And I'll talk about that in a minute, because you can clean, brush, or wash soil from the roots of the plants, and that that makes them exempt essentially. So if you do choose to do that, the maximum size of any individual clump of soil cannot be larger than 1/2 inch in diameter, or 12.7 millimeters. And we would consider anything smaller than that substantially free from soil. We're pretty reasonable in that, residue is fine, wash water or some dust or crumbs, but anything larger than 1/2 inch or 1/2 inch has the potential to harbor life stages of Japanese beetles. So that's why that requirement is in place. So as I alluded to before, the workaround here is that if you remove the soil, you remove the requirement. So if you are just transporting above ground plant parts on their own, no restrictions apply. If you are just transporting soil on its own, no restrictions apply. It's really only when you have a plant that's got associated roots and soil attached to it. So, using the example of someone moving, If you had a small tree in a 5-gallon nursery pot and you were moving from within the Vancouver regulated area to somewhere out in Langley, it would be acceptable for you to bare root that tree, wash the roots, and move it that way, and that would not require a movement certificate. So just a table here kind of summarizing all of this. Plants with soil or soil-related matter regulated year-round. There's always a potential for any life stage of the beetle, especially in the flight window of June 15th to October 15th. And movement certificate would be required if soil is attached. There are many exemptions. We can't capture every scenario, but we certainly tried to. So we've identified some things that are unlikely to be infested with any live life stage of Japanese beetle. And these articles can move freely without any restriction or movement certificate requirement. And that would include, like I said, soil on its own or above ground plant parts on their own, or potted house plants like anybody might have in their apartment that have been grown indoors exclusively. They've lived their whole life inside, never been put outside, or potted plants that have been kept inside during the flight period. So things can be outside from after October 15th to June 14th of the following year. And if they come in during that flight period of June 15th to October 15th, they would fall under this exemption. And any below ground root system or plant part like bulbs or corms or rhizomes that you want to retain, as long as they meet that definition of substantially free from soil, they are also exempt. Cut flowers and decorative branches are exempt if they're, especially if they're produced outside the regulated area and sold in florist shops and things like that. Fresh fruits and vegetables for consumption are perfectly fine. So all of those sidewalk fruit stands or stuff that's harvested from a community garden, um, that is exempt from movement restrictions. Compostable material like food scraps and green waste, if it's not associated with soil, that's fine too. Grass clippings and things like that. And I talked about transiting through, and that's certainly true. Anything that's going right through a regulated area without stopping, also totally okay. So that pest-free window is very important because depending on what your situation is, your material may or may not be exempt, depending on whether or not it was exposed to the outside during that flight period. So it's important to keep that in mind. Some articles are really only exempt during the pest-free window. So if and when you need a movement certificate, it's really important that you apply for it before you do the movement. Don't apply for it the day before or the day of, or try to apply for it for retroactive movement. That's not advisable. We have a pretty good turnaround time for issuing movement certificates, but you never know. Don't leave it to chance. Give yourself plenty of time. If you know that work is coming up and you have a date range for it, we're happy to work with you on that. If you're a retailer inside of the regulated area, we have a specific type of movement certificate that comes with conditions that can be implemented in the store. They're not onerous. They're not obtrusive to your business, but it does help mitigate the risk that comes with moving plants outside the regulated area that you can't control. And if you need to dispose of materials, I would again keep in mind that if you remove the soil, you remove the requirement. If it's just pruning waste or above ground plant parts, unless there's soil attached, to the root ball, you won't need a movement certificate. But if you're not sure, you can always contact us. We're very happy to help you through it. And, there's no expectation to remember every detail of this presentation. We're happy to help at any time. So we have a number, it's essentially a hotline that's specifically for Japanese beetle, and you can call that or email the email address you see on the screen, and we'll get you what you need. So again, you don't need a movement certificate if you're moving things in that pest-free window or within the regulated area, or there's no plants attached to the soil and so on. All the things we've talked about already. But another thing that we do is site assessments. And if you're not sure, like if you have an area of land and it's kind of sort of gravel and sort of dirt and there's some weeds over in the corner and you're not sure what's applicable to what, or if you just can't make heads or tails of the regulations, we're happy to do a site assessment. We can look at the project. If you give us pictures and maps, we can even come to the site and take a look ourselves and do an inspection and help delineate, where the exemptions are, what would need a movement certificate, where the restrictions apply, and lessen the impact that the regulations might have on your movement. It's not always cheap to deep bury stuff, which sometimes is a condition of a movement certificate, and so we're really aware of that, and we try to help minimize the amount of stuff that actually needs a movement requirement attached to it. We also don't require you to have a movement certificate for every little tiny movement. If you have a large project that spans a specific period of time or a long period of time, or sometimes these things last a year or longer, and there's going to be multiple movements at unpredictable intervals over like a 6 or 8 week period, let's say, we can work with that. We can issue movement certificates that are applicable to multiple movements. We can issue movement certificates that have a wide date range with a far into the future expiry date, up to a year at a time, and allow you to kind of work and come and go as needed in a compliant way. Again, highly recommended that you do this before you start your work. We assess the needs on a case-by-case basis, and the more accurately you fill out the form, the better we can get you precisely what you're looking for. It is also possible that you already have a movement certificate, like the one I described, that is still valid, and it was issued under that old ministerial order, let's say. In that case, it's probably best to check in with us. It is entirely possible that we would want to reissue you a new movement certificate with those lighter restrictions on it. It's probably going to be better for you. So if you need a new or an updated movement certificate, or even if your expiry date is coming up soon, best to get in contact with us and we can get that sorted out for you. It says that our forms are being updated and posted on the website. That's not true. They're good to go. You can get on the website and do that right now if you like. So talked about site assessments, and not much more to say about that. It's really just we have a rubric we can follow, and it's not a big deal to do it. It's not an onerous thing to ask, and we're happy to look at your project, look at your site, and determine whether or not it's eligible for an exemption or not. The process for that is basically the same as a movement certificate. You can contact us, phone or email, or go through the website as well. Talked about specific movement certificates for retailers, and again, maybe not go through the website. Contact us directly. That's probably the best way to do it, and we'll help assess the situation and there's a number of different options depending on what you would rather do as a business. So we can help figure out what works best for you and issue a movement certificate accordingly. So there's the website there, inspection.canada.ca/JB. And you just kind of click through. Movement controls is a keyword to look for. Under that heading is a button that says apply for a movement certificate, and that should download a PDF form that's fillable. And you just fill it out as best you can with as much detail as possible. Everything that's captured on the form is almost pretty much everything we would need for issuing a movement certificate, unless your situation is particularly complex. A correctly filled out form would not require us contacting you for additional information. So you fill out that form, you email it to our website, which is also on the form. So don't worry if you can't write it down right now. It's at the top of the form, and you just email it to us, and we issue you a movement certificate ASAP. So like with any regulation, we are enforcing the Plant Protection Act, and we do a lot of outreach to try to generate as much voluntary compliance as possible. That's really our goal. Our preferred way of dealing with things is having people put up their hand and voluntarily comply. And we love doing outreach and presentations like this, and um, we find them to be super helpful in getting people what they need. But there's always the potential for non-compliance, and we know that. And we know that there's probably people out there who are not adhering to these movement controls. And, we can't be everywhere at once. We do follow up with non-compliances that we're aware of if someone else makes us aware of them, or if we see them ourselves. We are out there checking up on that kind of thing. But we can't see everything, just like there's people out there driving around without seatbelts. Some of them get tickets, and probably most of them don't. So we do our best, and if non-compliance is found, we do have the ability to follow up as per our compliance and enforcement operational policy, which can include pretty heavy monetary fines. So we really try to not go there if we don't need to, and we find that education and outreach is the best approach most of the time, but it is always a possibility if there's something especially egregious. So just something to keep in mind. So what can you do? Well, you can attend things like this and learn about the restrictions and what the Beetle can do, and things like that, and ask us questions, contact us. We're happy to help you. If you are thinking about this presentation 2 days from now and you have a question, feel free to reach out. But also, we highly recommend following good biosecurity practices. So, while soil on its own is not regulated, if say you're using like a plug aerator inside the Japanese beetle regulated area, it's probably a good idea to make sure that it's clean before you move on. Again, human-assisted movement is the #1 way that the beetle disperses large distances. So just keep in mind, and if you see something, talk to your colleagues about it. Talk to us about it. We have a number of outreach materials that are really great that we can give you for you or your staff. And if you think that you see it, if you're doing work, you guys are out there, you're our eyes and ears, you're working with this plant material a lot. And if you think you see it, let us know. Surveillance does a really good job, and those traps do a really good job, but it's not everything. And we follow up on all suspect reports. There's also a button on the website to report sightings in British Columbia, but you can also call or email the number that I've shown previously and report sightings. Yeah, our website has a ton of information about biology and the survey itself and previous survey results and things like that in greater detail than this presentation. So I highly recommend the website as well. And that is my presentation. So again, there's the email, there's the phone number, there's the website. Give it a look, give us a call, and we'll do our best to help you. That's it.
Thanks so much, Jason. We did have a question come in, but we're going to save that for the Q&A portion. And we are going to switch over to Tracy.
Yep.
Perfect.
All right, I took my headset off, so hopefully you can still hear me okay.
Yes, we
Yeah.
can hear you perfectly.
Oh, good. Okay. Let's see if I can find the right, actually. See if I can start the right from the beginning. Okay. Actually, let's try it a different way. I've got all my screens open here, so I'm hoping I can figure out how to do this with all these screens. Here we go. Okay, slideshow from beginning. Okay. Tell me what you see.
I see all of your slides.
Okay. 1 second. All right, I'm going to just try something else here. I wanted to watch on my big screens with Jason, but it's too confusing, so I got to unplug some things. Hold on here.
Not a problem. While Tracy's doing that, actually, Jason, if it's okay with you, I will read out one of the questions that we received.
Yeah, sure thing.
So it's just loading here. So it says, to clarify, number 1, plants with roots and soil attached requires a movement certificate. 2, soil when not attached to plants is exempt. And 3, plants that are substantially free from soil are exempt. So if I'm a landscaper and I'm clearing a garden and digging out large shrubs, if I wash the soil off the root balls, I thereby make both the soil and the plants exempt.
Yes, effectively, that's true. Yes. Bare-rooted plants are fine to move as long as you're adhering to that definition of substantially free from soil. If you're moving things within that flight window of June 15th to October 15th, I still recommend people take a look and see if those above ground plant parts have adult beetles on them. It's probably not a bad idea. You can just give it a hard shake. They don't hang on very well. But the way that they have described the regulations is correct.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, Tracy, you ready to go? I see your first slide here.
Excellent. That's great news. Yeah, I thought I'd risk it with multiple screens, but yeah, not going to do that again in the future. So I'm Tracy Hueppelsheuser. I'm actually the acting director right now of the Plant Health Unit, and I'd just like to introduce the acting entomologist is Emily Grove, and she's joining us here today. And so I'm really excited to have Emily on the team. So I'm based in Abbotsford, and here's my contact information. And I'll just talk a little bit about just show you the main components of the program. And Jason has talked about survey, movement control, and a bit about communications and that. And I'll just talk about treatment. And so this whole initiative is a huge collaborative with many partners, 3 levels of government, as well as non-government organizations and industry, the BC Landscape Nursery Association primarily as the main industry representative. So we felt, of course, we needed everybody if we were going to have a shot at success on this. So my little icon is jumping around here. Let's see if we could. There. So the goal of our program still remains eradication of Japanese beetle from BC. And we feel that more effort now will be pay off in the long run. It'll prevent establishment and spread of the pest. And, you know, if it were to become established, the control will become overall more expensive for everyone. So that's what we hope to avoid. So our results so far, as Jason showed, we've seen a huge decrease in the number of beetles caught, actually over 90% decrease in number of beetles. So that's great. There's a link here to CFIA's survey reports, and it tells the story from the beginning. And so, yeah, we feel like we've done pretty well, and feeling pretty optimistic about results so far. So how do we measure treatment success? Well, decreasing beetle numbers in traps in the following year after treatment. So if we treat in 2022, for example, we have to wait until 2023 catch period, as Jason described, from June onwards, to see if our results, see if our treatments were successful. So we have to be very patient. So I'll talk a little bit about the 2024 rollout, and this process has been followed over the years, and just to give you a bit of a timeline. So the first thing that happens is we determine what the new treatment areas will be based on the trap catches. So we work on that usually in the fall and winter of the trapping year, and then the new treatment areas come out early in the new year. And by February, I get the notices to treat from the province issued to all the cities that require treatment. And this enables them to treat on the public lands. And then treatments begin in April. So in addition to that, the province drafts, or me drafts, letters to landowners, and we do one for each city. And this is sort of just a plea to the landowners, because the treatments are not mandatory on private lands. They are voluntary, and so we try to encourage folks that have turf to treat, and it might be land managers or private residents, and we try to tell them a bit about Japanese beetle and what we're trying to do in the program and why it's important. And so we ask landowners permission to treat, and so this letter is a tool just for helping the applicating companies to seek permission. So we make it available in several ways. Some of the cities mail it out in a city package. Some of them don't, but there's also mail drops by the landscape companies, and this is also available on the ministry website, and or possibly BCLNA as well. In past years, they've made it available. So so that's one tool. And then on the second page of that letter to landowners is the treatment map, so, or an area map. So this is a Burnaby one, so the Burnaby map would be on the back of the Burnaby letter. So let's talk about treatment areas. So the treatment area does change each year depending on where the beetles were caught in the previous years. So an area will be, if there's a positive, an area will be treated for at least 2 years, once per year. And then if no more beetles are caught, then it's considered free from Japanese beetle and dropped from the treatment area. So we have some examples where this has happened. So first I'll show you all the treatment areas, and then I'll talk about each of the cities individually. So hopefully you can see it on your screen. We have orange outlines, orange blobs all around Vancouver, Burnaby, and Port Coquitlam. And there's one little one down here in Richmond. And so those circles are basically 200-meter radius circles. So you can kind of envision that there's one beetle caught in the center of each of those circles. And if it's kind of an odd shape, then there's more beetles caught. So our goal is to treat all turf within 200 meters of a beetle catch. So there's the beetle catches. You can see the little dots just to give you kind of a sense of things. And I want to point out that over in Vancouver, on the far left side, there was only 3 beetles caught in 2023. So that is fantastic news. So I would say in Vancouver and Richmond, we're mopping up. We did not get any detections in Richmond, so that's great news for 2023. Burnaby, we're holding steady. We haven't got the same number of beetles were basically caught over the last 2 years. And then Port Coquitlam is our new hotspot. So there's Vancouver. The good news about Vancouver is the number of treatment areas has dropped from 14 to 9 over the last year. So that has happened because some of these zones are now free from beetles for more than 2 years. So they've dropped off the treatment list. Richmond, as I said, no catches in 2023. So they're just doing their second. There's a close up there. They're just doing their second year of treatment on that area. And then hopefully by 2025, they'll be out of the program. Burnaby, you can see the bulk of the area is up here north of Burnaby Lake. And then these 3 dots down below are all just public land spots where the city is treating on the public lands. So it's holding steady. Port Coquitlam. So there has been some expansion in the treatment areas for 2024. We're pleased that the epicenter remains the same, which is actually down here around McLean Ave, Central Port Coquitlam area. But we've got but mostly it's similar to what it was last year. So, but there are a few singletons out here. You can see these circles. So we're just being really aggressive and trying to treat as much as we can. Because of course, in all those zones, we definitely don't treat all the turf. You know, residents, not all residents read their mail, not all residents give approval, but we do get the public lands done. So we're feeling like we're getting some coverage with the treatment. So the treatment is 1 application of acelepryn. We mostly use the liquid formulation. It's just one application between April and July. I say July 15th here. We can even treat in the fall, but usually we treat only till the end of June, just because the soil dries up too much after that. So our target is the newly hatched larva. So we're actually putting the chemical down before the new eggs hatch later in the summer. And so we want to get the chemical in place in the root zone before those eggs hatch. And that's the way this product works. So it's a little different than, you know, you see something, you spray it. It's like the opposite of that. So this is how it works and why we do the spring treatments. The target is the grubs, and there's the acelepryn G formulation. This actually works fine in lawns too, but it's actually really good for challenging or small locations like landscape beds or upper level turf, ornamental grasses, that kind of thing. So some applicators are using this as well. So just a little snapshot about the active ingredient of acelepryn. It is a group 28. It does have several turf pests on the label. It's considered a reduced risk larvicide. It's low toxicity and safe on non-target organisms, and that includes birds, bees, mammals, and fish. Though it does have some toxicity to aquatic arthropods, so it is important not to get it in the water. And the rate is really low. So just looking at this little table down here, like the LD50s are over 5,000, so that's good. But grams of AI per 100 meters squared, like 1.5 grams per 100 meters squared, that's a low rate of application. So there's lots of benefits to this product. It fits well into an urban environment. What needs to be treated? Turf. Could be boulevards, could be parks, could be tree wells, fence lines, anywhere that turf is grown. Something like this, doesn't need to be treated. It's a poor egg-laying site. It's more gravel. It's not really soil. So this wouldn't need to be treated. So our treatments are underway. We start in April as the weather allows, and then just May and June. April, May, June are the main treatment periods. And right now, interestingly, private lands are a bit ahead of public land treatments. Often it's the other way around, but this year private lands got out of the gates first. So we have made some treatments in the fall in past years, but we try to stick to irrigated turf, or if the fall rains have started to come back. But we found that it's just been so dry in the fall that it doesn't really work out well for us. So we really need to get our treatments done in the first 3 months of spring. So the treatment schedules for the cities are located on the city websites, and I checked all these links today, so they're all working. Vancouver's starting their treatments, or just started their treatments on parks. They have 11 parks to go this year, plus all the boulevards and road edges. And Burnaby, his website there, and Port Coquitlam's website is there, and things are rolling in Port Coquitlam. Burnaby is getting ready to start. So I just wanted to draw your attention to some of the signage you might see out there. And the parks might not be closed, but they might have signs, or some of it might be taped off. But that'll be up to each of the cities to decide how they want to do that. There's usually staff to help instruct the public if it's a big throughway or a highly well-traveled area. So you might see some of this out there. These are examples of Vancouver signs, and they have some extra information and where to get more information, as well as the, stay off the lawn until the spray dries. We use these in public land or private lands as well. And so you might see these signs around. So the cost for treatments. The cities cover the cost of applications on public lands, the roadsides, boulevards, parks, etc. And private lands, the province covers the cost of private lands treatments. So through the Ministry of Agriculture, and so we're trying to, make that as an incentive to help people to make the decision to allow treatment. And the companies doing the treatments in the areas are Bartlett and Paris Base are doing Vancouver, Burnaby, and Port Coquitlam. These are for private lands. And then in Vancouver only, we have Cutting Edge, Neighborhood Lawn Care, and Louis Garden Services. And then Sprout Landscaping is a new team member this year, and they've got a few properties in the region. I'm not entirely sure yet where their properties will be, but they are based out of Vancouver as well. So the process for treatment of turf on private lands by licensed applicators is usually in the winter. We make a call out to applicators who might be interested in working together on this project, and so we have a conversation. It's up to the landscaper or the applicator company to seek permission from the owners or the land managers. The province really relies on the applicators to do that legwork. They're out there, they know the landscape, they know the areas, and they're best positioned to do that kind of work. So once they have the permissions, the quotes, they send their quote list to me. And if it's in the treatment area, I'll approve the treatment of turf. And once the work is done, I expect the pesticide records to come back to me, the ones that are required for Ministry of Environment, so that we can, verify the work was done, see how much chemical was used, what the location was, and those sorts of data. And then the invoice comes to the ministry, and I pay for the treatments. So this system has worked for us for the last few years, and and this is what we'll use again in 2024. This is an example of the pesticide use record. This is on the Ministry of Environment website, and quantity used, location, amount of product. Those are applicator name, certificate number, all those basic things that licensed applicators need to provide at the end of the year. So what's our plan for the upcoming years? Well, our trapping results for 2024 will determine what our treatment area looks like next year. And as the beetle numbers continue to drop, our areas will also decrease. So once we hit 2 years of no beetles, that equals eradication. And CFIA's annual surveys will continue as long as Japanese beetle is regulated. And that'll be a great tool to just continue to watch for what's happening with JB even once we're done our eradication. So it's been a bit of a long road, but we did expect this kind of timeline based on what's happened in other regions where they attempt this. So far so good, I would say. So here is some more information. This QR code takes you to our Ministry of Agriculture website, and here you can see the URL there as well, but also our partners, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the cities, Invasive Species Council of British Columbia, and the BC Landscape and Nursery Association have excellent websites and information about Japanese beetle as well. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out. Here's my email and phone number.
Thanks
okay,
so much, Tracy.
That's it.
Okay, so with that being the end of the presentation portion, we are about to switch into the Q&A. So I'm going to end the recording here as we talked about.